happens when you break a promise to a fairy? Not a pixie with glitter wings, I mean a real lake-bound, ageless force of nature who sets the term for your entire life. That is the story of the Lady of the Lake, but not the Arthurian one. This is a Welsh fairy tale, older, wilder, and more tragic. It's a tale of love born from beauty, tested by conditions, and then doomed by human nature. Today we're diving into the shimmering depths of one of the most heartbreakingly magical stories in Welsh lore. I'm MT Lynx, and this is Storybite. Chapter 1. The Fairy Folk and Their Rules. The Lady of the Lake. One easily gets acquainted with the Welsh fairies, for nearly all the good ones are very fond of music. Or they live down in lakes or up in the mountains. They are always ready to help kind or polite people who treat them well or will give them a glass of milk or a saucer of flummery. But oh, what tricks of mischief they do play on mean or stingy or grumpy folks with bad tempers. They tangle up the harnesses of the horses, milk the cows, let the milk go to waste on the stable floor, tie knots in their tails, or keep the dog's mouth shut when robbers come sneaking around. Better not offend a fairy, even no higher than a thimble. A favourite place of the elfin ladies of the lake is high up the mountain in one of the freshwater mountain ponds. They are cousins to the mermaid that swim in the salt water. They say that these lake maidens love to come up close to the shore to smell the sweet grass and flowers which the cows love so much. Near one of these lakes dwelt a widow with only one son named Gwyn. One day he took his lunch of barley bread and cheese and went out, as usual, to tend the cows. Fairy tales often tell us more about the actual rules of a culture than its actual history. In Welsh folklore, fairies, or Tylwyth aren't all sweetness. They're powerful, conditional, not evil, but they are bound by rules. They love music, generosity and manners, but they punish arrogance or neglect, swiftly and sharply. This entire story is framed by a set of laws. You can love a fairy, but only if you follow their terms. And it's in that balance of reverence and recklessness that our tragedy brews. Part 2. First sight of the lady. Soon he saw, rising out of the water to dress her long and luxuriant hair, the most beautiful lady he had ever seen. In her hand she held a golden comb and was using the bright lake surface as a mirror. At once Gwyn fell in love with her and, like an unselfish lad, held out his refreshment, barley, bread and cheese, all that he had, bidding her to come take it. But though the lady glided towards him while he still held out his hand, she shook her head, saying, "O thou of the hard-baked bread, it is not easy to catch me." Sorry enough to miss such a prize, he hurried home to tell his mother. She, wondering also whether fairies have teeth to chew, told him to take soft dough next time. Then perhaps the strange lady would come again. Not much sleep did the boy get that night, and before the sun was up, he was down by the lakeside holding out his dough. There, hour after hour, neglecting the cows, he looked out eagerly over the water, but nothing appeared except ripples started by the breeze. Again and again he gazed in hope, only to be disappointed. Meanwhile, he thought out a pretty speech to make to her, but kept his dough and went hungry. It was late in the afternoon when the trees on the hills were casting long shadows westward that he gave up watching, for he supposed she would come no more. But just as he started to go back to his mother's cabin, he turned his head, and there was the same lady, looking more beautiful than ever. In a moment he forgot every word he meant to say to her. His tongue seemed to leave him, and he only held out his hand with the dough in it. Let's meet our hero, Gwyn, a cowherd, poor but kind. One day, while tending the cows, he sees a vision, the Lady of the Lake, combing her hair with a golden comb, using the lake's surface as a mirror. This is what fairy tales do best. Beauty so powerful it stops time. Gwyn's reaction is pure. He offers her everything he had: barley, bread and cheese. But the fairy, she speaks in riddles. She rejects the bread. Why? It's too hard. Thou of the hard-baked bread, it is not easy to catch me. This isn't just coyness. It is a test, one of many. To approach a fairy, you must be subtle, patient and exactly right. The epitome of come correct or you don't come at all. Part 3. The test of the bread. But the lake lady shook her head again, only laughed and said, "Thou of the soft bread, I will not have thee." Though she dived under the water and left him sad and lonely, she smiled so sweetly as she vanished that, though again disappointed, he thought she would come again and still might yet accept his gift. His mother told him to try her with bread that was half-baked, that is, midway between hard crust and soft dough. So having packed his lunch, and much excited, and this time with bright hopes, Gwyn went to bed, though not to sleep. At dawn he was up again and out by the lakeside with his half-baked bread in his hand. It was a day of rain and shine, of sunburst and cloud, but no lady appeared. The long hours of watching and waiting sped on until it was nearly dark. When just about to turn homewards to ease his mother's anxiety, what should he see but some cows walking on the surface of the water. In a few minutes the lady herself, lovelier than ever, rose up and moved towards the shore. Gwyn rushed out to meet her with beseeching looks and holding the half-baked bread in his hand. This time she graciously took the gift, placed her other hand in his, and he led her to the shore. Standing with her on land, he could not speak for many seconds. He noticed she had sandals on her feet, and the one on the right foot was tied in a rather unusual way. Under her winsome smile, at last, he regained the use of his tongue, and burst out, "Lady, I love you more than all the world besides. Will you be my wife?" She did not seem at all willing at first, but love begets love. Hard bread was wrong. Soft dough was wrong too. Finally, Gwyn offers her bread that is half-baked, and that somehow is just right. Symbolically, this is about balance. Fairy rules aren't about morality. They're about harmony. The world of the fairy can't be approached in extremes. Only when Gwyn brings the middle path does the lady accept it. It's also a metaphor for love itself. You can't be too rigid or a pushover. You must meet your partner in balance between desperation and detachment. And the lady, she responds not with laughter or riddles, but with her hand in his. It's a moment of magical realism, a shift in tone. Their lives are about to intertwine. Part 4. The contract. And finally, yielding to his pleadings, she said rather solemnly, "I will be your bride, but only on this condition. If you strike me 3 times without cause, I will leave your house, and you will only be to blame, and it will be forever." These words stuck in his mind, and inwardly he made a vow to never give his lovely wife cause to leave him. But not yet did happiness come, for even while he took oath that he would rather cut off his right hand than offend her, she darted away like an arrow, and diving into the lake, disappeared. At this sudden blow to his hopes and joy, Gwyn was sorely depressed, as to wish to end himself. Rushing up to the top of a rock overhanging the deepest part of the lake, he was about to leap into the water and end himself, when he heard a voice behind him saying, "Hold, rash lad, come here." He looked, and there down at the shore of the lake stood a grand old man with a long white beard. On either side of him was a lovely maiden. They were his daughters. Trembling with fear, the lad slipped down from the rock and drew near. Then the old man spoke comfortably to him, though in a very cracked voice. "Mortal, do you wish to marry one of my daughters? Show me the one you love more than the other, and I will consent." Now the two maidens were so beautiful, yet so exactly alike, that Gwyn could not note any difference. As he looked, he began to wonder whether it had been a different lady in each case that rose out of the water. He looked beyond the old man to see if there were a third lady, and when he saw none, he became distracted. He feared lest he might choose the wrong one who was not promised to love him. Almost in despair, he was about to run home when he noticed that one of the maidens put forward her right foot. Then he saw that her sandal was tied in the way that he had already wondered at. So he boldly went forward and took her by the hand. "This one is mine," he said to the father. "You are right," answered the old man. "This is my daughter Nelferch." This right here? This is the inciting promise, the emotional bomb ticking just beneath the surface. One condition, 3 strikes, and no second chances. Fairy tale contracts are sacred magic. The moment the lady sets her terms, we know 2 things. Gwyn will fail, and that failure will cost him everything. That is the weight of a good myth, inevitability. And just to twist that knife, she doesn't wait for a wedding. She vanishes. Gwyn, thinking he lost her, is ready to end himself. That's when the lake reveals its power. Her father appears, an old man with 2 identical daughters. Gwyn chooses correctly, the one with the unique sandal tie. This is classic mythic code. Choose wisely or lose everything. Part 5. The Fairy. Take her, and you shall have as many cattle, sheep, horses, hogs, and goats as she can count of each without drawing in her breath. But I warn you that 3 blows, without cause, will send her back to me. While the old man smiled and Gwyn renewed his vow, the new wife began to count by 5s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the end of each count, drawing in a fresh breath, there rose up from the lake as many sheep, cattle, goats, pigs, and horses as she had counted. So it happened that the lad who went out of his mother's cottage in the morning, a poor boy, came back to her a rich man, and leading by the hand the loveliest creature of whom man or woman had ever looked upon. As for the old man and the other daughter, no one ever saw them again. The lady's dowry is one of the most poetic sequences in the tale. She counts aloud, and with each breath, entire herds rise from the lake. This moment is pure dream logic. The land gives its magic, but only through her voice. This is a symbol of feminine abundance, of spoken power, and of fairies as stewards of natural wealth. It also ties directly to the real-world physicians of mythi, descendants of this lady, whose wisdom is said to come from the lakes itself. So what do we learn here? That gifts from the other world are real, but temporary, and they belong to the fairy, not the man. Part 6. A Marriage of Light. Gwyn and his wife went out to a farm which he bought, and oh how happy they were. She was very kind to the poor. She had the gift of healing, knew all the herbs which were good for medicine, and cured sick folk of their diseases. 3 times the cradle was filled, and each time with a baby boy. 8 long and happy years followed. They loved each other so dearly, and were so happy, that Gwyn's vow passed entirely out of his mind, and he thought no more of it. On the 7th birthday of the oldest boy, there was a wedding at some distance away, and the father and mother walked through a field where their horses were grazing. As it was too far for Lady Nelferch to walk all the way, her husband went back to the house for saddle and bridle, while she should catch the horse. "Please do, and bring me my gloves from off the table," she called, as he turned towards the house. But when he returned to the field, he saw that she had not stirred. Let's take a moment to breathe. The marriage is sweet. The couple is deeply in love. They help the sick, they grow their family, and they live a life of generosity and peace. This is the fairy tale's false plateau, the quiet before the storm. Fairy wives in folklore often represent a temporary elevation of a man's life, and her presence always has a time limit. We just don't know when it will end. But here, it's clear. It ends at the third strike. Part 7. Strike 1. So before handing his wife her gloves and pointing playfully to the horses, he gave her a little flick with the gloves. Instead of moving, instantly she heaved a deep sigh, and then looking up at him with sorrowful and reproachful eyes, she said, "Remember our vow, Gwyn. This was the first causeless blow. May there never be another." Days and years passed away so happily that the husband and father never again had to recall the promise given to his wife and her father. But when they were invited to the christening of a baby, each one was full of smiles and gaiety, except Nelferch. Women, especially the older ones, often cry at weddings, but why his wife should burst into tears puzzled Gwyn. Tapping her on the shoulder, he asked the reason. The first strike is barely a tap, a flick, a gesture, a joke, and yet it counts. The lady doesn't rage, she sighs. She reminds him, this is number 1. And in that moment, the clock starts ticking. This is a tragedy by degrees. Gwyn isn't cruel, he's just thoughtless. And that's enough. Fairy rules are absolute. Intent doesn't matter, only action. We should all listen by some fairy rules, I think. We're not listening to people's good intentions, only their actions these days. Part 8. Strike 2. "Because," said she, "this weak babe will be in pain and misery all its days, and its life will end in agony. And husband dear, you have at once struck me again with a causeless blow. Oh, do be on your guard, and not again break your promise." From this time forth, Gwyn was on watch himself, day and night, over whom hangs the sentence of life's end, should he fall asleep on duty. He was ever vigilant lest he, in a moment of forgetfulness, by some slip of conduct or a moment of forgetfulness, strike his dear wife. The baby, whose life of pain ended in agony, as Nelferch had foretold, soon passed away, for happily its life was short. Then she and her husband attended the last rites of sorrow, for Celtic folk always have a funeral and hold a wake, even when a baby, only a span long, lies in the coffin. At a christening, the lady begins to cry, not out of emotion, but from foresight. She knows the child will suffer. Gwyn, misunderstanding, touches her shoulder and asks why she weeps. This is strike 2. Again, it is a small thing, but again, it's a violation of the vow. And with each strike, the fairy begins to pull away, not physically, but emotionally, because the end is approaching. Part 9. Strike 3. Yet in the most solemn moment of the services of burial, Nelferch, the wife, laughed out so long and with such merriment that everyone was startled. Her husband, mortified at such improper behaviour, touched her gently, saying, "Hush, wife, why do you laugh?" "Because the babe is free and from all pain, and you have thrice struck me. Farewell." Fleeing like a deer home to their farm, she called together by its name each and every one of their animals, from stable and field, yes, even those harnessed to the plough. Then over the mountain all moved in procession to the lake. There they plunged in and vanished. No trace of them was left, except that made by oxen drawing the plough, and the mark on the ground which men still point out. And now we arrive at the final moment, the funeral of the sick child. Everyone grieves, but the lady laughs, because the child, is finally free. No more suffering, no more pain. And Gwyn, embarrassed, touches her. Why do you laugh? That's it. Strike 3. The vow is broken. And she leaves. Not with a fury, not with vengeance. She simply calls every animal by its name, and they walk back into the lake with her. Even the oxen dragging the plough. And that image, that's what stays burned in the memory. Magic departing the world. Part 10. Legacy and Loss. Broken-hearted and mad with grief, Gwyn rushed to the lake and was seen no more. The 3 sons, grieving over their drowned father, spent many days wandering along the lakeside, hoping once more to see one or both of their dear parents. Their love was rewarded. They never saw their father again, but one day their mother, Nelferch, suddenly appeared out of the water, telling her children that her mission on earth was to relieve pain and misery. She took them to a point in the lake where many plants grew that were useful in medicine. There she often came and taught them the virtue of roots, leaves, juices, and various virtues of the herbs, and how to nurse the sick and heal those who had diseases. All 3 of Nelferch's sons became physicians of fame and power. Their descendants, during many centuries, were renowned for their skill in easing pain and saving life. To this day, Physician's Point is shown to visitors as a famous spot and in tradition is almost holy. The end. Gwyn is gone, but the lady returns, not to him, but to their sons. She teaches them the properties of herbs, the healing power of nature, and the art of nursing. And from them a lineage of physicians begin, the physicians of mythi, real-world historical figures in Welsh medicine. This is what sets the Lady of the Lake apart from other fairy stories. The ending isn't just about loss, it's about legacy. Her love dies, but her wisdom lives on. This isn't a happily ever after story. It's something older, deeper, and far more powerful. A story that says, love comes with terms. Magic has a memory, and the loss of something beautiful doesn't erase the good it leaves behind. This has been Storybite, and I'm empty Lynx. If this story stirred something in you, share it. And if you're ever offered love by a lady from the lake, for heaven's sake, don't tap her on the shoulder. And now you know. Go ahead and very gently tap this video right here. I'll see you there.